Hello and welcome to Happy Horror Time. My name is Matt Emmert.
And I'm Tim Murdoch. Jason lives forever. Thanks to today's special guest, he's the writer, director of the wittiest, funniest, and most creative installment in the Friday the 13th movie series, Part 6, Jason Lives. He's also written and directed horror movies like One Dark Night, and Sometimes They Come Back, as well as a few episodes of Friday the 13th, the TV series. He can make any project fun, whether he's writing it, directing it, producing it, or even scoring it. Did I mention he's a rock star? Please welcome to the podcast, the multi-talented Tom McLoughlin.
Thank you, guys.
Hey.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. You know, we read that you grew up in Culver City, which is very local, and used to make your own little movies in like the MGM backlots with your friends. So what was it like growing up doing that, and what kind of movies were they?
Horror, of course. You know, I did my version of, it was more like the Christopher Lee Frankenstein, that sort of look, because I certainly couldn't do the Boris Karloff makeup. Wolfman, Dracula. And then when I was, I guess, about 12, James Bond, my dad took me to go see Dr. No, which is why I have that tribute to James Bond at the top of Friday the 13th, because that had a huge influence on me. So I was out there trying to do Bond, with our little 8mm movies. But the cool thing is that, the old backlots were still there, as a kid growing up. And at 7, I started to take my friends and we'd go under the fence, in the back lot. And we had these enormous sets that we could do our shitty little movies in. And, we were shooting on these little rolls of 8mm. And of course, when it ran out, it was like, okay, let's put another one in. And, we never finished them, and then you had to send it to Chicago for processing. And sometimes it came back and sometimes it did not. So, I have halves or quarters or ends of movies, because again, you just didn't know. But the experience was incredible. And at one point I saw a director's chair, the classic old lower director's chair, and just a director on the back. And I took it, and ran with it. And then when I got home, I looked at the back and it said John Sturgis, who did The Great Escape and all these incredible movies. And I thought, God, am I going to get cut for this? And years later, I met him and I said, I got a confession, sir. I took your director's chair. And he looked at me and he goes, is that where that fucking chair went? And I said, you remember this? He goes, no, if it did you any good, kid, that's great. And I said, do you have any advice for like a young guy wanting to make movies? And he goes, yeah, wear comfortable shoes. And then So, I mean, it all sort of worked out to have this story, right? And I still have his director's chair, sitting up in my little horror museum upstairs.
That's amazing. First off, have you ever considered like trying to digitize any of those old movies? You can like send tapes away and get it put on digital files just like for the fun of it.
I know. I'm terrified to open the boxes that it's going to be dust because, it's bad enough with the, film 35 stuff. I've got like It's a Wonderful Life on 16mm. I've got a bunch of those early, when they first, what was the name of that company that released little bits of horror movies on 8mm. And I know all those turned to dust on me. So I got to do it, at some point. I
just took mine in, and it's embarrassing. I mean, I know mine's just VHS from the early 90s, but I haven't. It's so hard to watch.
Yeah.
Anyway. So growing up, what was your favorite horror film, or which film had a big impact on you?
Obviously, all the Universal movies. I mean, that influence is all over my stuff. And Gothic horror movies, the Hammer ones, just anything that had that sense of atmosphere and stuff. I tell people all the time, if you can watch my Friday the 13th and take the color out and watch it in black and white, you'll see very clearly, this is what John Cranhouse and I were trying to do, is to give it that old Universal look, not exactly on every scene because, we didn't have that kind of control or lighting or studio to do some of that stuff. But in general, it really is very high contrast. And that was so much of the influence were those. And the cool thing was here in LA, they had a thing called the $1 Million Movie that was on like 9 o'clock, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And they showed the same fucking movie. Same Frankenstein, 5 nights in a row. Son of Frankenstein, 5 nights in a row. Dracula, all of them. So by the time I got to Saturday, man, I had all the dialogue down. I knew every shot, every angle. And, and of course, I never stopped doing that. Still today, like it's the cozy thing, go to sleep, put on the channel that's got something on Pluto, I think, that has those movies still. And you can just sit there and, lots of them that I never saw, The Return of the Son of Invisible Man and this kind of stuff, but they still look great. I mean, they still have that great classic 40s studio look to them. But that was the big influence. Then cut all the way to the beginning, of the 70s, Jaws and Exorcist and Halloween, all those things, that really was the killer. And still to this day, Exorcist, nothing affected me like that did. And it wasn't so much what it did to me personally. It was sitting in that audience that first week and watching people get up and run out, like about to throw up, or grown men stand up and pass out. And my favorite thing was at the end of the movie, when they're rolling the credits, people would get up and how you put your coat on and they would just freeze and stare at the screen like they were in a state of shock. People went back to church. I mean, Newsweek, Time Magazine, is God back? God is no longer dead. It just took our whole culture and changed it. But the main thing was that Friedkin and Blatty created something that just really got to people. And I went and saw that movie as many times as I could. We had no internet, so we couldn't, hear what people had to say. You had to just hear through like LA Weekly, what was it called in those days? I think it was called the Free Press, to see if there would be like some screening where one of them would be there, or the DP, I went to, a seminar with him, but I wanted to get what they did, how they did it, because I'd love to one day be able to do to the audience, what that movie was doing, but in a different way. Like as you saw last night, I chose the laughs because that's another part of my background. If I can't scare them, then make them laugh. I want to hear something, it's that, that they're paying attention and they're into it.
I mean, I love the fact that you got to see The Exorcist in the movie theater. I mean, we obviously are a little bit younger than you, so we can only watch videos of audience members being interviewed and seeing, because that's kind of an experience that, it's just something that like I wish I could have for certain movies that came out before we were born. And so that's incredible, because that is such one of those movies that we ask this question to everyone. And I'd say 75% of people say that The Exorcist is the movie that had the biggest impact on them. So, but barely have we met someone who actually saw it in the movie theater.
The cool thing is like everyone, when people mention The Exorcist, they always like it was a global phenomenon because
nobody had taken on, I feel like, something that serious and religious before, like exorcism and dealing with the Catholic Church and that kind of thing. I mean, now exorcism movies are a dime a dozen, but
Rosemary's Baby was the only we had before that. And that was a tour de force with what he did with that movie. I mean, I did go to a seminar with him, and he shot that whole movie on one lens, a 24 millimeter, and you have to kind of know that to realize why it had the same, ambiance and sense of, and he did these cool things where he would, like she or was it, what's her name? The one playing the mother, not the mother, the next door neighbor, Ruth Gordon. Yeah. He would frame something in the door frame, and she'd be just off to the side, and we would be kind of looking through the door, but you'd see the audience go like this. Like they wanted to see around the other side of the door. And again, it was just this incredible filmmaker making things that really caused you to participate as well. Mm-hmm. But Rosemary had a big impact. And when I was taking movies around or, scripts around, it's like, you're kind of looking for a Rosemary's Baby thing. You got anything like that? And there's been a few that have tried. There's been a few that have been, got close on it, but that kind of stands as one of those character-driven pieces that just got under everybody's skin until The Exorcist, and then The Omen, obviously did an amazing job on that same thing. But I was learning editing on Hollywood Boulevard at a place called Sherwood Oaks Experimental College. Sherwood Oaks Experimental College. Thank you. It was late night. Got in here at 3:00 this morning. And Dan O'Bannon was my teacher. And Dan, as probably a lot of you guys know, co-wrote with Gary Shuzette, Ron Shuzette. Gary was the one who ran the Sherwood Oaks. Dan had done Dead and Buried. He had later on, and of course Alien and stuff. And so he was the editing teacher, and he brought in John Carpenter to look at our movies. And and so the first note I ever got, from John Carpenter, and I remember I did a little movie called Ouija, and about a Ouija board, and that my girlfriend at that time gets possessed, and she's got this huge knife, and she's running around chasing me with it, and then I end up on the top of a couch, and she goes like this and literally puts it right this close to my crotch, and then comes back up again, and I look, and as a comedy bit. Afterwards, John goes, "Hold it. What's your name?" Tom. Tom, was that a real knife? I said, "Yeah, why? You don't ever, 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 ever use a real knife. It's too dangerous. There are phony ones that can look pretty good, or you just switch it out or whatever." So cut to maybe a year, 2 years or so later, I hear there's a movie by John Carpenter called Halloween. I go Friday night to go see this thing. That was another incredible, devastating experience to see an audience react to that movie going in, having no idea what they were going to see, to walk out knowing the killer is still out there. It didn't kill the bad guy like we were all used to. And the fact that, I didn't realize till later, there really wasn't a lot of blood. It was just suspense and terror and this faceless, shape, as he called it. So that was another one that, I wish all you guys could have seen these things and how the audiences reacted. It kills me now to see, it's like I go in, I went into it going, okay, and they only responded like when there was some physical thing between the characters or whatever. Pennywise wasn't generating that kind of, crazy jump out of your chairs, thing. And I'm going, somebody's got to do it again. Somebody's got to somehow get us out of this passive, and I kept watching, see anybody was texting, or thank God they weren't last night. But there is this sort of removal from the screen where before you were strapped in like a roller coaster and you had no choice except to go on that ride, and either going to send you up the aisle or you're going to be yelling at the screen, which is why I have the American Express scene in there, because there's always somebody, as somebody did last night, don't leave home without it. Very old joke, but somehow people still kind of remember that campaign. Or they, certain types of jump scares used to work great. Now they're so cliche, they don't work, but I wanted at least the comedy to still play. So certain things, I mean, I know my son went to film school, and Friedkin came down there and showed him The Exorcist, and they all just watched. He said, "Yeah, it was really good." It's like,
that's
you
funny.
guys, you did, because another generation just, they heard all the hype and didn't, actually go on that ride, which was...
or maybe it's oversaturation, like now just between streaming services and so many choices and so many types of movies, maybe people have just like seen it, done it. What I find to be the funniest is because, Halloween was the first movie that really affected me, the original Halloween. And when you tell new, like much younger people now about it and they watch it, they think it's slow and boring. And I'm just like, oh my God, that's the magic of it. But again, it's like, I don't know if it's just today's day and age, or because there's so much like just action and so many like bigger kills and bigger blood counts that maybe people aren't used to just the slow building suspenseful films,
Yeah.
Who knows?
But then look at Blair Witch. When Blair Witch came along, and there was incredible hype, and it was the early use of the internet, to create buzz and word of mouth, and this is real and all this stuff. And I remember I got a bootleg tape of it. And I had a little, theater in my old house, and it was daytime. I pulled all the curtains. I had blackout curtains and stuff, and I watched this thing by myself, figuring, it's going to be this life-changing experience. And I appreciated it, and I was blown away that it didn't have anything that you'd normally expect with the cliches, of horror and stuff. But the word of mouth, and how many people even today still go on about, oh, that thing just freaked me out, So it can work if you see the right thing. And so I go to the theater, and people were on their phones, people were talking, and it didn't work. 2 weeks later, they had a preview of I See Dead People.
Sixth Sense.
Sixth Sense, thank you. And it looked to me like they had taken a movie off the shelves that was made in the 80s and put it out there, and people were responding like they should to it. And I thought, well, here's something that was groundbreaking that he did with Blair Witch, and now here's something that's kind of did all the notes and then had a wonderful twist ending, which I don't think he's ever been able to top.
Yeah.
Many attempts. But that shows stuff. You can take the craft and still make it work. And that obviously had incredible word of mouth and was a huge success.
Yeah. Well, so jumping into your directorial debut, the 1982 supernatural horror film, One Dark Night. And just for listeners who haven't seen this, it kind of revolves around a high school girl played by Meg Tilly who's forced to stay overnight in a mausoleum that's haunted by the spirit of a telekinetic murderer who drains victims of their bioenergy. I have to ask, since you also co-wrote this film, where did the idea for this whole psychic vampirism come from?
Wow. Okay. I'm one of those guys that doesn't just make movies about the supernatural and the paranormal. I also kind of have lived it in a few situations. I had the wonderful luck of having a girlfriend in the 60s that saw ghosts, and her mother was an astrologist. So there was a couple of, I'm not going to go on and on because it was supposed to be a 3-hour show of all the different events that happened. But I did have like this encounter that I could not explain that occurred when they were playing with a Ouija board. And the night that they decided, because her parents had a group of people that were into the paranormal, and I wouldn't really call it a cult, but it was a certain way of thinking and projecting things and stuff. But they burned a Ouija board in the fireplace while we all sat there and watched. And my hand to God, it was like the weirdest thing because that thing didn't burn at first. Then, like in certain sections of the Ouija board, like a yellow flame, blue flame, green flame, red flame, and there was like that sound of like the, those piccolo Pete's they used to call them, but that, and we're all sitting there watching, like nobody could move, obviously, and then it just went to ashes.
Wow.
Nobody said anything, everybody like, well, okay, do anybody need coffee or anything? Okay. I left feeling like I had a presence following me, but I thought, nah, you're crazy. I was 16 years old. What did I know? But I went home and sure enough, like in Haunted Mansion, it followed me home. And it was an incredibly bizarre evening with my girlfriend Amy's mother trying to talk this thing out of my room. And again, I look at this now like I dreamed it, but I didn't, and there was things in New Orleans and that I had confrontations of stuff that I can't explain, stuff that didn't make sense. But, there's going to be people saying, you're nuts, too many drugs. I said, sorry, it wasn't about drugs. It wasn't about any of that. It was, I guess, my openness to want to see something like that happen. So we started to study it. And we got involved, and when I say we, I had a group called the LA Mime Company, and we hooked up with something called Mindsigenics, I think, something like that. But it was a study of the Huna philosophy, all these different things that they put in there. And again, I swear to you guys, we could take a toothpick and water and lower our brainwave frequency and just keep staring at it, and that son of a bitch would move. And then it would go, we could get it to go the other way. We could go on the freeway, and she kind of programmed us with this sort of post-hypnotic suggestion of being able to hold our fingers together. And if a car wasn't moving fast enough, we would just go move in your mind, and suddenly the blinker would go on, the car would move. And you go, my God. And this is, truck drivers and housewives, and it wasn't just us, artiste types. We're able to do these things. And you go, yes, there is more we are capable of than we use. But it became like parlor tricks, that you could take somebody's ring and describe this person, and you think you're just making it up. And you open your eyes and the person's going, you just described my grandfather. That was his ring. You just got and you're going, holy shit. But you stop doing it at a certain point because A, there's no money in it. Second, people think you're just crazy, and third, it's like, what can I do in my life with it? Well, I used it for my movies. So there
Is
was
that
one
the
phenomenon.
inspiration to write your scripts and direct it?
Yeah, a lot of that. A lot of the stuff, like sometimes they come back, it touches upon it, but particularly One Dark Night, because one of the phenomenons is called psychic vampirism. And pure and simple, it's you're around people, certain people in your life, and they go da 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 da, and you're sitting there going, yeah, yeah, and they don't pick up on the watch, they don't pick up on you looking, they just keep going, and by the time you walk away, you're like, you're drained. That's a form of what's called psychic vampirism. They literally are feeding off of your energy, and they're just getting more energized. The reverse, which I don't know what the term is like I work with Bette Midler, hanging out with Bette and listening to her talk about things and working with her and stuff. I walked out like, I had snorted a ton of cocaine. I was, vibrating. I mean, Bette, and there's a lot of people that you have, I'm sure, in your lives too, that just have this energy that energizes you.
Tim pointed to me.
I'm joking.
No, but you're so right. Oh, am I the one who drains
yes,
you
I'm
or
exhausted.
amps you up? No,
You do both.
You're so right though in that. I didn't even think about it literally, like because in the movie it's like, the killer's literally draining their energy and murdering them, but by getting through. But you are right that sometimes there are people in your life that you hang out with, and when you're done, you feel like you've run a fucking marathon.
Oh yeah. You take on all their problems.
Or it's like they suck all the air out of the room, or they take your energy with them. But one thing we read about this film, we read that you weren't happy with the original ending, so you and the crew filmed a new final shot in your own garage. Is that true? And what was the original ending, and what was the final shot that you guys filmed?
Well, we made this movie. Nobody wanted to make the movie because when I took it around in those days, which was the 70s, because we actually made that movie 1980, 81, but it didn't get released. It sat on the shelf because the company went bankrupt till 83, I guess, the top of 83. Mm-hmm. So everybody wanted a slasher movie, and didn't care for this whole gothic horror, all that. So I finally found Mormon investors that needed to lose $1 million before the end of the year. And it's like, can you be ready to shoot in 3 weeks from now? I had storyboarded. I dragged that thing around for so many years. I was confident to do it. And I was looking for your kind of typical California blonde to play the lead. And the casting director brought in Meg Tilly, who had her hair in her face, had braces on. She was like, I think 19. And she kicked her hair back and took my shitty dialogue and brought it to life. And I went, this is great, So then, the bad girl,
was the blonde.
I ended up being, the blonde, bitch, and had, Elizabeth Daly, CG, Daly in there and stuff. So I had a great cast, and of course, Adam West. Somebody was asking me last night, why did you cast Adam West? And I said, well, for one, I love Batman. Two, the casting director said, nobody wants him. It was like George Reeves with Superman. They only could see him as this one thing, so they wouldn't cast him. And I went, oh, fuck that. He's an actor. Let's hire him. So,
I'm
of course,
so glad you did.
Yeah, I know. It was great seeing him in that role. Truly.
I love Adam West.
Yeah, he was great, and he was funny and stuff. But the only thing is, the first day when we were shooting, he came to me and he said, Tom, the way I like to work is I like to start my voice up here and then have it come down here and keep it very interesting that way so that it goes up and down. I said, Adam, that's Batman. I'm sorry, I have to take that away from you and just go, okay, well, you're the director. If that's what you want to do, we'll do that. And he did it. He did it perfectly.
That's great.
When we finished the movie and put the whole thing together, and it actually had an ending where, you didn't see what happened to the girls, the ones that were torturing her. And there was a long camera move towards the open crypt, which was now sealed. And, as it got closer and closer, you could hear, them screaming in there, and kind of it ended as sort of it began in this claustrophobic sense of a mausoleum. Well, they cut that out. They had it at the end where just, Meg just walks out at the end of the movie. And I was like, what, and me and Mike Hawes, who I, worked on this film with, went, we got to come up with something. Well, the easiest, quickest cliche, which we still use today in trailers, is the big bump scare, at the end, after you think everything's quiet and stuff, which was Carrie. everybody stole from Carrie, including the original Friday the 13th. They finished that movie. The original thing that, I don't know if a lot of people know this or not, but Victor Miller wrote was that the Adrienne King character, is on the beach, I'm stuck by the lake, and she's completely wigged out after what just happened with her and Pamela, and she's holding Pamela's head, mumbling,
And
which I think
rocking
is
back and forth, yeah.
That sounds a little more realistic.
That actually
what
sounds
would
like
happen.
the end of Sleepaway Camp, because she's holding his head and rocking back and forth.
With another whole element.
Well, there's also that.
Yeah. So you wanted to add that jump scare because so the part you added was where the corpse kind of falls in screen with the scream.
Yeah. Well, first we had the toothbrush.
Yes.
Because I know a girl, Sally, who always carried a toothbrush, and I said, "Why did you do that? I'm curious." He goes, "I don't know. I like the taste, but it was like an oral security blanket for her, I think, when it got down to it." So I gave that little thing to the kitty character. And I thought, so many people have brought that up. It's because it's so strange. I thought, well, why not end on that toothbrush so you get a laugh and then the corpse head goes, boom, down in frame. But they wouldn't give us a penny to do it. So thank God, Craig Stearns, my art director, who had also worked on Halloween and The Fog and Stephen King's movies and stuff. But back then, he still had parts of the set. So we brought that into my garage. We set it up. Tom Berman gave me the corpses. We brought the actresses back in, put them under the bodies, and shot this little thing. Panavision gave us the cameras for the one-day thing, and all I had to do was pay for the film. So that's kind of how that, I just needed it to have some button at the end, but the original ending would have been, to me, far more creepy. And I was going for more atmosphere and creep, in that thing, corpses and the pus and the maggots and all that. And I thought for sure, guys, I was going to get, an R rating because we didn't have PG yet, I don't think.
Yeah. No, PG-13 came around in like 84.
Yeah, I think it was for the second Indiana Jones movie is when it first.
Yeah, it was Gremlins and Indiana Jones that turned the tide.
Yeah, it is nuts that you got a PG rating on One Dark Night.
I love it.
Yeah.
We were pissed because we thought, oh, now they're going to think it's just lame and it's not going to have anything. But here's the flip side. All these grandparents and parents, so what do you want to see? It's called One Dark Night. Oh, it's PG, sure. And they sent them off to the movies, or sat there with them. And of course, not a whole lot happens until that last half hour. And then it's pretty much pedal to the metal Corpseville.
Yeah.
And it's certainly, somebody just recently called it, a cult classic zombie movie. Well, I don't know what defines a zombie, but these suckers ain't walking. And these suckers aren't brought back to death. Brought back from death. They're floating and they're just like dead bodies being pushed against you. So I was going for that sort of gross, kind of thing, boys putting salt on snails, kind of, creepy, weird shit. But that was sort of like, I thought, well, that's something we hadn't seen. And
well, you did. I mean, obviously you did get to do the creepy part. I mean, obviously onto Jason Lives, you got to use maggots on the face from the get-go. So how did you get involved with Jason Lives?
Yeah, well, how did you first get involved with the film, the Friday the 13th series?
Well, as I told you in the 70s, that's all they wanted. Get me some teenagers, make sure somebody's going to be topless or a few, good sex scene in there, someplace that's isolated, forest, desert, I don't care, something like that. And then, something over the face, person's face, so you don't know who it is, any kind of mask, I don't care. And it's like I had this One Dark Night thing that was anything but that. So it's like, tell it walking, goodbye. So, when this offer came up from Frank Mancuso Jr., they were desperate because 5 pissed off people. I mean, it's a great, gritty, grindhousey Friday. And as Quentin Tarantino told me, Tom, yours is good, but 5 is really what a Friday's supposed to be, that kind of thing. I love yours, but, and it's a movie, but at the same time, this is kind of what I think it's a genre. But the fans didn't like it wasn't Jason. The fans didn't like it was Tommy Jarvis at the end that was looking in the mirror like, and they thought for sure it was going to be, the next one was going to be Tommy, as Jason, and they didn't care for that. So I get this call, from my agent to go and meet them. He saw One Dark Night. He loved the whole Gothic thing. He said, I'd love to have one that sort of has that element to it. And I said, so what do you want? He said, we got to bring back Jason. I said, and that's it. Nothing else you want? You can make the movie you want to make. And they let me. I mean, anything you guys hate about the movie, anything you like about the movie, blame me. Because they really took their hands off, with the exception of one thing, which is I introduced Jason's father at the very end. And I thought that was cool because I had him actually look somewhat like Raymar from my One Dark Night, this Svengali type character who was just pure evil. And I had a whole thing that he was actually Jason's father, not Mr. Voorhees. Mr. Voorhees is who she was married to. This guy came along, and did what he did. And it's in the game. If you guys play Friday the 13th, the game, I've put that in the Pamela tapes where she talks.
I played it, but I'm not good at
that. That's so cool. Wait, so if you're the only thing they told you was bringing Jason back, was there ever any inclination to just scrap all the past characters and start new, or had you always wanted to stick with Tommy Jarvis?
No, they figured I should stick with John Shepherd, who was playing Tommy Jarvis, so that they could kind of keep that going. John, for whatever reasons, and it all kind of depends which one you want to believe, either went religious and decided he didn't want to do anything like that, or his agent asked for too much money and Paramount wasn't not going to pay it. I don't know. I've never met John to ask him, that question.
I like combining those. His agent was religious and asked for too much money.
So was there ever a script that consisted of like Pam or Reggie the Reckless? I mean, was there ever a real continuation of part 5, or no one?
Yeah. Had you ever wanted to bring those back?
They didn't talk to me about that. I mean, if you're going to let me do it, I said, look, there's only one way to bring somebody back, and it's Frankenstein. I got to figure out how to get a lightning bolt into this sucker 6 feet down. So that was kind of my artistic challenge. And then I had all my, silly moral things myself. It's like there was so much bad press about what we were doing to the youth of America with our violent movies and stuff. I wanted to make every kill unimitatable. You can't turn somebody's head and rip it off. You can't punch a heart out. Horshack's heart comes out, triple decapitations, all this stuff. So I wanted to have the fact that Jason now is supercharged. In my book, not a zombie. I even have the sheriff shoot him right in the head, figuring, okay, get that headshot in there. He gets his head back and keeps coming. But of course, it's called the beginning of the zombie Jason, because I guess that falls for a lot of people in that category. Not for me, and it wasn't my intention. But it was.
Yeah, you definitely brought back the fun. You brought back the fun to the series because part 5 was so gritty and dark. So I mean, I like them both for different reasons. But.
Well, when you were speaking of Jason and casting, one thing we read about casting Jason is that you guys had to replace the original actor who was hired to play Jason. What happened exactly, or did he just not fit the look?
No. What they did, and it can kind of, I'm sure all you fans know this, you've traced back through the movies, they always hired a guy that was also like a stunt coordinator of some sort. Occasionally, somebody couldn't do a particular stunt, they were a little too old or whatever, so they bring another stunt man to play Jason for those particular shots. But that was sort of the marching orders, is we got to find a guy that's a stunt coordinator so that we don't have to pay 2 people, we only have to pay 1. So we brought in Dan Bradley. And Dan Bradley did this amazing music video where he's on fire in slow motion and, running alongside of a bus. And of course, that was impressive as hell. So it seemed like, okay, he's the guy. And he brought him in, and he's very unlike CJ in terms of his energy level and stuff. So all the paintball scenes, all the stuff that was daytime, which is what we started with because we had to go into nights, was Dan Bradley. And if you look, his physique is very different. He moves a lot slower. The Jason I was using last night for my little 4D thing, he was very much like the physical shape of what Dan Bradley was like and moved. But like maybe 3 days after we were into, 2 days, I guess it was, and the dailies came to Paramount, I heard that they just went, no, he's too lumpy. It's just, the costume looks wrong. The costumer was Frank Mancuso's sister. She was going, I can't fit him in the clothing anymore. He's eating too much. And I felt horrible, but I said, he's a great guy, And the next thing I know, it's like, remember your second choice? The bouncer from Chippendales or something. Like, yeah, him. we're sending him out.
I was just about to ask you. I think that's a fascinating fact that Jason was a Chippendales dancer. I think that's so awesome.
CJ Gray. Jason
now
Voorhees.
Jason is a Chippendale.
Yeah. When did you know right from the beginning that he was a Chippendale? Like what? Like
did he reveal that to anybody?
He was a bouncer, at clubs, and I think that's where the makeup effects people, had seen him, and that there was like a Halloween party or something, and he dressed as Jason, and he came out, and he is former military. So he had that, which for me was exactly what I really wanted, a Terminator type, work. And, being obviously a mind trained, I'm very much about how you physically do things and how snappy the moves are and how deliberate they are. So he was, a godsend in terms of what the movie was. But no, I didn't learn about the Chippendale thing till years later. And
I would tell everybody.
I love that. It's just such a fun fact that one of the Jasons was a Chippendale dancer.
Yeah, but you look on the internet. His wife humorously posted a picture of him.
Oh, I saw him.
So we touched on this a little.
Guy.
But I wanted to ask you specifically about this because, like we were saying, and Tim was saying, what sets your installment apart the most from the other Friday the 13th, especially up until this point, is that, Jason Lives doesn't take itself too seriously. Like you said, the characters are more self-aware. You added a level of humor to the horror, and it makes it really fun for the audience. But what inspired you to take that approach from the very beginning? What inspired that approach?
I was basically a Emmy-nominated comedy writer and performer. I was on the Dick Van Dyke series, Van Dyke and Company. And at 26, I'm writing and directing basically pantomime sketches for Dick Van Dyke, who still is a friggin' 98 or something. Yeah. One of the greatest human beings to walk the face of this earth. I mean, it's the sweetest, nicest. And way I wrote is I would kind of do the part, and then he would take it and take it another level, what was amazing. But every week there would be another guest on the show. So I'm directing at that age with this pantomime background, Lucille Ball, Freddie Prinze, Carol Burnett, Tommy Smothers, Flip Wilson, Chevy Chase. All these legends, doing this thing. And it got nominated, for an Emmy. So I suddenly was, okay, that's what I am. I'm a comedy guy and, based on physical comedy. So I had a movie that I wanted to do that was a dream ever since I was raised as a little Catholic boy in Culver City, of an angel, and a real winged angel. The closest we got was Barbarella, with that look of the wings, but they didn't move like the way I wanted them to move and stuff. So that was the movie that I really wanted to make. I met Frank Capra, who made, to me, still the greatest movie for me that's ever been done. It's a Wonderful Life, because it has such humanity. And it's like, if you want to make a message, everybody makes a difference. One person can make a difference in your life. I love that message. I got to bounce things off of Frank. I met him, and, I could send things. And every time I got depressed, because nobody wanted a movie about a fantasy female and stuff, because this was way Splash, Mannequin, and even E.T. So I was getting nowhere with that, just like with One Certain Fate. It was like, nope, So that was what I wanted to kind of put into this movie, like it or not. And I said to Frank, do you mind if I put humor in it? He said, you're not going to make fun of Jason, are you? And I go, no. Jason, it's still going to make a monster movie. And I'm calling him a monster because, to me, that's what I've done, is monsterized him here with this. And I just want the audience to know right from the jump that this is a franchise that only competition at this point in terms of how many were the Bonds. And I said, part 6, come on, we can't take this seriously anymore. I got to put a little wink. So I did it as many places as I could, including breaking the fourth wall. And some folks have a strange idea of entertainment.
I love it.
Yeah.
And that saved this thing from bad reviews. So many reviewers, New York Times, Variety, all this said, yeah, it's like all these kills and stuff, but you can't hate a film that makes fun of itself and the audience, And so it kind of gave us both things, But what they didn't think about was Aliens opened the week before. Aliens, I just saw it again in the theater a couple of weeks ago because they did a release. That is such a fucking incredible movie. Yeah. And I know, as a horror fan, if I went and saw that on the opening week, and the next week, a Friday the 13th was probably going to be fucking Tommy Jarvis, and God knows what they're going to do. They, let's go see Aliens again, and you go, you come, let's all go. So that's basically what happened. So instead of being number one, we were number two under Aliens. So they consider that not the success that they wanted to. But it was.
I also think Part 5 didn't help because everyone felt cheated that it wasn't Jason, and you had the honors of bringing him back.
That's what they thought they were going to get with my movie. That was the intention that seemed to be out there, that they were going to carry the legend, but Tommy was going to be the new Jason. And the fans did not sit still for that. Yeah. So I was kind of like, we went to the theaters, people were going nuts. It was wonderful. And they were laughing and they were yelling, "Don't leave home without it" on the American Express card. They were falling into everything I set up as let the audience do the punchline and things. So, and then of course, as these things were in those days, it played 1 week, second weekend, third weekend, now it's out in the boonies. And then by the fourth weekend, it's like, did you see that thing? No, it's already gone. So, there was no, DVDs or streaming, any of the stuff we have now. So I figured it would just be kind of forgotten. And I am more shocked and humbled by the fact 37 years later, we're still doing screenings. I have to say, watching it with the crowd again, it moves fast enough that people don't get bored. There's always something happening. So I kind of just tripped into what ended up being greatness that you didn't, I really thought people were going to hate it. I really did. When I went to that first screening, I have no idea what they're going to do. And as Harry Manfredini, who was there last night, said, these people that they invited to the screening had been out in the sun for about 6 hours, drinking, smoking weed. I don't know what else they were on. And they came into the screening at Paramount, and it was like a nonstop funhouse of screams and yells. I couldn't hear shit. I didn't know if the movie was working or not. They were so enthusiastic and so wild. And Frank came up to me and he goes, "Congratulations, great job. I need 3 more kills."
Yeah, we were going to ask you about that because we know after previous, and first off, just for any listeners hearing this, we're mentioning last night a lot. There was a screening of Jason Lives that Tom was at along with a bunch of cast members. Tim and I had the honor of seeing it on the big screen, and there was a Q&A after. They even had a guy dressed as Jason walking through the theater at various times, which was really great. His costume looked great, by the way. But anyway, just in case people are wondering by that. But yeah, so we know that after previews, you were asked to add kills. How did you personally feel about that? And looking back, do you think the movie's better with the additional kills, or would you rather have kept those out?
Now I just embrace the fact that they left Frank, who was in charge of this, left me alone to make the movie I wanted to make. As I mentioned, the asking in the script version to take the father out, I got. And I did not kill the caretaker because that was the point of at the end is the caretaker sees the father there and he gets paid for taking care of the graves of Jason and the mother, Pamela's. That was.
And did you film anything for the father parts that you're talking about? Because they're so interesting.
No.
Nothing.
No, I think that's such an interesting aspect. Like the father aspect, it's never been tapped into. So I like that you did that.
It's interesting to hear. It sucks that there was no filming, so there can't be like deleted scenes, but.
Well, one of the supplemental things on one of the things, and if you go get that Scream Factory box that has everything, I've got like, 3 or 4 commentaries, on that versions you can watch with the editor and the cast and all this. But they actually made storyboards of it, so you kind of saw what the vision was and got Bob Larkin, who was the caretaker, who was out at the motion picture home, to come and do the dialogue. And Jason's father didn't talk in the thing, so there was nothing to get there. But you kind of got that whole vibe of what he was doing is, well, thank you, Mr. Voorhees, for taking the money and stuff. I'm taking really good care of them. And then you see the father look at Jason's grave and start to move in. And he's going, you get the sense he's not in there. And then it dissolved to underwater and it's going towards him underwater. And then you see his eye open. And then, that was the ending. And I thought it was very cool. Frank said, I love it too, but we don't want people at the end of that movie to go, all right, the next one's going to be about Jason and his pop. And no, we can't do that. So that's why it went out and gave us the caretaker to kill which we did here in Bronson, by Bronson Caves in that park. And then I just kind of introduced two people that were, based on the names of my best friends, Steve and Annette, and, they get speared. And as I were telling last night, we had a whole device where, he kind of lifted them up with a machete, which looked great, except it didn't quite work, in the end. So they just ended up getting skewered, and it was it.
I thought it was a nice little callback to, do you remember the death in part 2 when the two of them get skewered in the bed? It's like a double kill.
Yeah. But I had run out of things. I mean, they asked me to do, part 7. And I said, Frank, I would love to do that. I have no idea. So what, where this would go yet. Let me think about it. And he said, all right, let me put this out there for you. Jason meets Freddy. I go, okay, but that's New Line and you're Paramount. And he goes, I've been talking to him. I think we might be able to come to terms. Give me a week. Wow. So he comes back a week later, and again, guys, this is 86, a long time before Jason met Freddy eventually. And he comes back and he goes, have you been thinking about it? I said, yeah, it's a challenge because Freddy exists in the dream realm and Jason's here and stuff. But he said, well, forget it. Can't do it. They don't want to make any deal with us. So, that's not going to happen. What other idea do you have? And I said, wait a minute. You guys have Cheech and Chong, right? I said, okay, you want to do Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. Why not Cheech and Chong meet Jason? And he laughed and said, that's hilarious. But I don't think our audience would, the Cheech and Chong audience is not going to want a Jason movie and vice versa. I said, I'm sorry, you're wrong. All these people smoke the same weed. They say, love the same kinds of jokes. To me, making them counselors or making them out there camping, something. Oh, that's Jason, man. Oh, what are you talking about, man? I just think it could have been classic, And he said, no, it's just too far out there. Well, when I announced it years later, it's like we got a whole big thing. Even Cheech and Chong said, yeah, that would have been great.
That would have been hilarious. So because we were going to ask you about part 7, if you were involved or what. So then because I know when we've talked to people from part 7, it was the whole Jason versus Carrie thing. Did they ever come to you with that idea or had they already moved on?
I think I pretty much, well, again, remember, I was still in love with this Date with an Angel, Frank Capra type romantic comedy. And what they did for me, both Frank Sr., who ran Paramount, and Frank Jr., invited me to a party at Dino De Laurentiis's house for New Year's. And, Peter Bogdanovich was there, Arnold Schwarzenegger was there, all these people. And I see Frank and his father and Dino smoking cigars out in the backyard talking. And then Frank Jr. came over to me and said, Dino wants to talk to you. So Dino comes over. He said, Tom, let's do a horror movie together. I got a new company, a DG, and it's going to be fantastic. And I said, well, I want to do a romantic comedy, actually. And you don't want to do that. You want to make a horror movie. Well, eventually we made Sometimes They Come Back. But he broke down and, let me make that movie. So that also kind of took me out of the mix, and it's fantasy. It's based on a character somewhat close to me. The first person I went out to for the part was Jim Carrey. And he was completely unknown. He had a TV thing that he had done. I talked to him about it. He goes, hey, I'd love to do that. So I brought him in, and he did the thing and he was great. He was hilarious. And afterwards I turned to Dino and I said, that's the guy. No. What do you mean no? He's a funny kid, but he's not a good looking kid. You know who we want? We want Tom Cruise. I said, what? Tom Cruise. I said, Dino, he's $20 million. We can't afford that. We make a deal. No. Never happened.
But, I know what film you're talking about, A Date with an Angel, which I love with Phoebe Cates. But yes. I have to go back a little bit and ask, how did you get Alice Cooper? Because we love his 3 songs in the movie.
Yeah, how did he get involved?
He actually, his record company actually asked if, we would like to have an Alice Cooper song, something that he would write for specifically the movie. And I had temped the score with every kind of heavy metal band or it's just stuff that I loved. And there was, Alice songs in there. And so Frank Mancuso Jr. said, would you like to actually have Alice do it? And I said, want to hear the weirdness? In the mid 60s, when I had a band, the Sloths, which has now become Slothzilla,
He's by the way, listeners, Tom is wearing a Slothzilla t-shirt. We'll have to take a screenshot picture at the end to show that because that's awesome.
Which is, yeah, it's a new group, and it's you're going to love it because it features a lot of the songs from horror movies, that you know and love. But anyway, they said, he'd like to do this song. I said, hell yeah. But we were we played on the same bills together, but his band in those days was called the Naz, and he was Vincent from Texas. That's all I knew. And we all used to hang out at Frank Zappa's house. I don't know if anybody remembers who Frank Zappa is, but
of course.
He was legendary in terms of making music like we never heard before. And so we would talk and stuff, and he was a great guy and things. I didn't know for years that was Alice Cooper, because of the makeup and everything else. But the kinds of stuff that I heard he was doing, because I didn't see him actually perform until after we did Friday, was very similar to what I was doing on stage, blowing up stuff, throwing myself in the audience, breaking things, And when I saw him, I went, shit, that's what I wanted to have done. But of course, never could afford on that level, with hangings and decapitation or guillotining and all that incredible stuff that he does in his show. But, there is that sort of kindred spirit of being a rock and roller and loving horror. So it was like the perfect fit, with having him there.
Yeah. Was there ever a time when Friday 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, came back? Like, was there ever a time it was not in your life? Like, it came back with the internet or like fan conventions or the internet? Like, was there a period of time where it was not part of your everyday?
The Friday the 13th.
Yeah. Like, did Jason Lives go away for a little bit from your life and then come back? Was there a resurgence?
Yeah. Like, when did it first, you were saying, oh my God, 37 years later, we're still talking about it. But did it take the internet or Crystal Lake Memories, the book, for it to come back into your life? Or was it just always constantly talked about?
No, it did disappear. And in fact, I had gone, after I had done, the Stephen King, Sometimes They Come Back, and it was aired on CBS. CBS offered me a miniseries called In a Child's Name with Valerie Bertinelli and Michael Lonkeen and things. And I went, I don't know from TV movies. I'm a horror guy, but they loved the acting and the characters. And Sometimes They Come Back. They loved the family aspect, which was very important to me to have in that movie to make it emotional and stuff. So, with an agent now with the, creative artist agency, that I said, okay, yes, to the miniseries. And that decision, because that ended up being the #1 movie that year, I was now, the guy that, in that little category of the 3 top TV movie directors. So I sort of intellectualized, well, I could do 1 movie every 3 years, or I could do 3 movies in 1 year, just keep going. So that's how I managed to get, now 43 feature films, because, you do them full out like they're a movie. You cast with, Donald Sutherland and I did one with Kirk Douglas and all these legends where, what I was being offered, and again, stupidly turned down, was Bride of Chucky. I said, I don't do it. And then I get a script called, Scary Movie. And I'm reading it and I'm going, Jesus, this is just the sort of the same kind of parody kinds of stuff I was doing. I can't follow mine with another one in the same way, as good as it is and stuff. So I passed on it. And
which became Scream, yes.
Became Scream. And then years later, I meet Kevin Williamson, and, we're talking about something he was doing at the WB. And as I was leaving, he goes, I got a confession for you. Your Jason Lives had such an, impression on me, had such inspiration for Scream. And I said, Scary Movie. Oh, you knew that's the title? I said, I was sent the script. I turned it down. And when I suddenly woke up and said, wait a minute, it had already gone to Wes Craven, who did an incredible job. And I'm very happy for the success. But again, it's those weird things that can happen where you go, I want it to be different. I thought Bride of Chucky wouldn't be what it, became. So things like that, that was sort of where my horror, career was at. So television was giving me these, Oscar-winning people to work with, and scripts that were about real monsters. AIDS, global warming, prejudice, mental illness. dark stuff, and a lot of true crime, guys that got away with shit, and their stories were like frightening. And so I'm talking to people on death row about what they did, and it suddenly became this whole other kind of obsession. And then I was offered the prequel to The Exorcist, and I got hired, worked for Morgan Creek for 2 years prepping that movie. I kept saying, if the script's not great, I'm not going to do it. I met William Peter Blatty. He said, if this thing sucks, I'm going to go on every talk show and tear the movie down. I said, Bill, my hand to God, I am not going to do it if the script doesn't work to me. Well, the script didn't work. I turned it down. I signed a gag order that I had nothing to do with it. And they went off and, started the movie for a year with John Frankenheimer, who I had worked with in the movie Prophecy. I was the mutant bear in that costume.
Yes, I saw that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, when we did it, we were looking at this bear going, this isn't scary. It looks like pizza was thrown on a bear and stuff. And Tom Berman did a great job with just the way they shot it and things. I'd learned how to run on all fours, with these extenders and things. It was a tough gig. And Kevin Peter Hall, I met on that, who went on to do Harry of Harry and the Hendersons and was Predator and stuff. We were very close, and it just broke my heart, like when he passed, because he was such a sweet man. But, Frankenheimer's on it for a year. He goes into the hospital for some sort of treatment and dies. So the script comes back to me. I say, well, let me read it, see where it's at. What John did with it was exactly the same. So I passed again. Wow. Yeah. And they got Paul Schrader. Now I figure, okay, Paul Schrader, taxi driver. He's he was raised as a Calvinist. He's going to make this thing kick ass, And also I wanted no digital effects. It had to all be done in camera and stuff. So he goes in, he shoots the movie that was written. He shows his director's cut. They fire him, and it's like, it's not scary. Doesn't have this. So then they bring in, I think it was Rennie Harlan.
Strangers from Chapter 1?
From Strangers Chapter 1 and Nightmare on Elm Street 4 and Die Hard 2.
Yeah. And I think, was it Rennie or somebody else? I'm blanking now. I'm sorry. But it was somebody that he reshot the entire movie, the entire thing, brought the actors back in, had a lot of digital effects and other things in there, and it didn't work. So then they showed Paul Schrader's version a few years later. That didn't work. So they spent $40 million, another $40 million. I wanted to do it for 18 because I've done enough TV movies. I knew how I could sort of spin it and get what I wanted and still not spend all that money. And I would be finally getting paid something once the movie broke 50 million, domestic. And of course, the book said, nope, it didn't. So I never got any pay out of the whole thing. So again, classic Hollywood story. But that was the only time I sort of was going back into it. And then I did a movie with Andy Garcia, a feature called The Unsaid, which had incest in it. And very, I thought, tastefully done. But Universal went, we can't release a movie like that. So that went straight to DVD. Yet when Andy Garcia and I would go to these film festivals and stuff, Deauville Film Festival and stuff, they'd give it a standing ovation. People cried, it's so emotional and stuff. And, it just kind of got dumped on, because in those days it was dumped onto DVD or VHS, not like now where it's streaming and see it in the theaters. When did you ever think somebody's going to be telling you this is great that you can see it in a theater? It changed our lives.
I was going to ask you, because obviously you've had an extensive career, but one thing that you were quoted as saying in the book Crystal Lake Memories by Peter Bracke was that Jason Lives was the most fun you've ever had working on a film throughout your career. And it seemed as if the cast and crew agreed. And I'm just wondering, overall, what made working on Jason Lives such a fun, enjoyable experience?
We were the kids kind of playing hooky. And we were shooting, obviously, without the use of the unions. And that's why they, kind of would hide these movies. We shot it under the title A Lad Insane from the David Bowie, albums, because Frank loved to hide behind a David Bowie album for every of the Fridays. And you can actually see A Lad Insane in that one scene where Sissy and Paula are playing cards and doing the whole little Jason thing. It's sitting right there for anybody to see. But so we were sort of like not supposed to talk about what we were actually working on, and we were in Covington, Georgia, with small little town. You know, the highlight of the Friday nights was Swoop the Loop, which was in the parking lot of a not Alpha Beta, one of those classical grocery stores, and the kids would just drive in a circle around like American Graffiti does in the whole town, but they just drive in a circle.
I grew up in Ohio. People did that. I don't
really.
Yes.
Some people have a strange idea of entertainment.
Tell me about it. Yeah. And I recently purchased the entire Friday 13th, the TV series from 1987 from 1990, and I love it because I watched it all when they first aired. And you got involved. How did you get involved?
Frank said to me, "I'm doing this series. Would you like to, be involved with it?" And I said, "You're going to do a series with Jason?" No. It's going to be completely different. But we're calling it Friday's Curse, which is what it was known in Canada where they were shooting it. And then I think overseas they used that. But for America, they wanted to drag in that audience that loved Friday, and there wasn't any movie. I guess they were still doing the movies then. But when he told me the premise, I said, "That's a great premise, but I really think it's misleading people to think it has some connection." And he goes, "This is what Paramount wants to do. What do you want? Do you want to do it or not?" And I said, "Well, let me see." Because I was still doing the TV movies and things. And he came back to me again, and he said, "We want to make you the story editor." We have one story editor in Canada, James Henshaw, and then we need one here. So I had an office at Paramount. People were coming in. There was like a new hit movie that they wanted to grab the director, Steven Soderbergh. And it's like, that doesn't seem like he's a guy that would want to do something like this. But they tried and stuff. But they did get Cronenberg, in Canada to do one of the things. So finally, they gave me one of them to direct called the Master of Disguise. Yes. And I love that whole premise, John Wilkes Booth's makeup thing, and you killed and you took the blood and, put your makeup on and suddenly you look like Timothy Dalton. And the actor that we had that vibe about him, which I thought was great. But underneath all that was a, Quasimodo kind of fucked up face.
The lead actor, John de LeMay, he wanted to leave the show. And so you had, I don't know if it's the word is honor, but not killing him off, but like you did a 2-episode arc where he was turned into a kid. So they didn't really kill him off in case he wanted to come back, I'm assuming.
Exactly. I'm amazed you saw that, because that seems like one of those ones that, so many people did never, because it was like the 3rd season. But once the box set comes out, I guess it's true. See all that. But Frank came to me, as he does with marching orders. "Okay, we're coming back. We're not going to have John. He thinks he's going to be a movie star. I'm telling you right now, the next thing that John, LeMay is going to be saying is, 'Do you want fries with that?'" And I said, "Hey, that's cold shit. Come on, man. He's great." He said, "No, he wants to." And of course, he ended up doing a Friday on top of it all, which was strange. And we still are friends, John LeMay and I. We still, correspond back and forth. I couldn't say enough great things about that guy. And he, really was a good actor. Obviously Christopher Wiig was just so classy, in that movie or in that series. So he said, "Okay, we got to kill off him, but we can't kill him because I think he's going to sober up and want to come back. So you got to do something that removes him from the trio. And also I want to do something Exorcist." Really? Okay. So those are the marching orders. So I went out, and having been raised Catholic, I knew about all these sort of miracles and things that happened. And there was always like Our Lady of Fatima, Our Lady of Guadalupe. I thought, well, what if there was a nun, who had seen one of those visions? So she had some sort of power. And then give Ryan a backstory where something traumatic happened at a certain age, and from that point on, him and his mother were like estranged. I just started riffing these things, And
that was the cool part about the show, is that because there was no Jason, it was like an antique shop. So it's like you can make your own rules. So as a kid, I really enjoyed it.
But then he never came back, right? So what happened to the kid?
It was a really cute guy that came in. I can't remember his name, but he did like the final 3rd season. Yeah.
The character Steve, and he was a great guy. I in all due respect, he wasn't like as good as I felt John was, as an actor. But, he certainly was wonderful eye candy. And he certainly, could do the things he was asked to do. But there was never, the series would really, they bounced that thing around when it was shown. It'd be on, 11 o'clock at night one time, then it'd be at 3 a.m. another time. And
it was on all, like, as a child, it was like 7 o'clock, 11 o'clock. It was so crazy.
Jumping forward to something you kind of touched on a little bit, but jumping forward to 1991 when you directed the TV movie adaptation of Stephen King's short stories, Sometimes They Come Back. And again, for listeners who haven't seen it, it's about a man who's terrorized by the teenagers who killed his brother and also died themselves when he was a kid. How did that come about for you? And were you a Stephen King fan at the time?
Well, that was Dino. We're going back to Dino. And, because we did Date with an Angel and his company went bankrupt 2 weeks before the movie opened. So that one really opened and closed, and it was heartbreaking to me because Michael Knight from All My Children was the lead, and him and I went on a tour. And Mike, incredible guy, really sweet, was also very funny. And man, we'd go to airports and go right through the because they went, it's Chad or Tad.
Yes.
And he was a major heartthrob. So Dino got the good-looking guy, and he also was funny. And just the response that we got on the road, I thought this movie's going to really do well. Well, it turns out the soap opera people don't go to the movies; they stay at home and they watch shit. So that crowd didn't come. They didn't know how to sell it, so they jumped into the sort of Splash imitation, which killed me because I had this before Splash, and so the reviews all about, well, here comes another, Splash, ripoff. So I kind of looked at it as like lick your wounds. My son had just been born, so it was sort of like, okay, that's the important thing. Don't worry about this. But as years went on, that little movie ended up being what they called in the South a slumber party movie, because the parents would rent it and go, okay, there's nothing wrong with this, girls, this is what you're watching tonight, so that had enough of a success that Dino said, let's do my horror thing. I got a Stephen King short story. And they had guys that were, who did Jewel of the Nile and things. I'm blanking on their name right now, but the screenwriters, the script didn't quite work. So, we workshopped it for a bit and stuff and, went and did it. Now, the thing is that I was shooting it widescreen CinemaScope for Europe because it was being released as a feature film there. And then I had to, have it in that square format for television. So it was kind of for dual purposes. And it did so well overseas that sometimes they come back again. Sometimes they come back for more. I had said to Dino, I don't want to be involved with anything after the first one because, this is my killer dog. For those who can't see.
Did you ever see the sequels that came out after Sometimes They Come Back?
I didn't.
Did you see the sequels after Jason Lives?
Yes. And the first one, part 7 started with, I don't know, it seemed like 10 minutes of footage from my movie, which, setting people up and getting them kind of, into the vibe of it again. And, I don't think anybody got paid for the fact that it ended up opening the other movie or whatever. I think once you do something that's theirs. But, I watched each one and I can't say they didn't have some great things in it. I mean, Jason X, that freezing of the woman's face and then him breaking it was like, wow, that's a cool idea. So there was always something that I liked in them, but I just sort of felt like the thing with certain movies like Amityville and stuff, you kind of have to stay on the turf because part of what's scary is that Crystal Lake is sort of, evil ground and things have happened and there's history there. And what the fuck are you doing walking around in the forest at night? So when they start going, to Mars and Venus and Oklahoma and Manhattan,
New York City,
and they don't really go, they stay on the
cruise ship
because they couldn't afford New York. And, the poor writer-director, Rob Hedden, so disappointed from the script, that he thought was going to be done, ended up being, more, Jason on the yacht. But, that was sort of that thing of, we got to do something different. And, my whole way going into this, and I've written a sequel, by the way, called Jason Never Dies, which is 13 years after, after I put him down in the water, 13 years later, there's a massive storm that hits in November of 1999. And you guys are probably too young to remember, but as we were heading into that, 200, things zero are going to change. So there's this weird paranoia that was there, mainly for the adults. Kids, teenagers wouldn't have cared. But just to me, that whole idea of, party like it's 1999 and all that, I wanted to have that element. But the big thing was to actually have it snowed in. I mean, heavy snow. John Carpenter, The Thing, kind of snowed in. And it's literally Crystal Lake, but it's frozen. So Jason's going to come up, obviously, through that ice. I'm going to have a chase on Crystal Lake.
That's a movie I'd want to see.
Wait, when did you write this, or was this
during the COVID?
Oh, and so it would have been a direct sequel to Part 6, and
yeah.
And then you've heard about like the Never Hike in the Snow type of fan. Did it any translate into that, or how?
Well, the funny thing is, I was going to keep it secret. I didn't want anybody to hear because these fan films were starting to happen, and Never Hike Alone. I thought Vincente did an amazing job, making a fan film. And, went back to like old Jason and stuff. And then, of course, there was one after the other that started happening. So I thought if I go and open my mouth about Jason and the snow and all that, somebody's going to get there before me. Well, I finally broke down and released it on, Bloody Disgusting. And I think it went to Dread Central and it went to a bunch of things. And I get as soon as it came out, I get a call from Vinny going, can we meet for lunch? And I said, sure, and we sat down. He goes, I have something called, Never Hike in the Snow. I said, you do? And he told me what it was. And I go for it, because you're going to get that done way before me, because mine is going to cost too much. It's got to be a studio picture, with heavy snow and cabins and the kills and all that stuff, and you raising money now, I can't do this on a fan budget. So, go with it. And he found out how difficult it was to come back weekend after weekend and sometimes have snow and have no snow and having to add it in after and stuff. So it is a difficult thing to take on. But my game plan was, find some place that's really, totally snowed in, for sure it's going to be in, go and shoot all those exteriors, freeze everybody's asses off because it's at night. And then go into the sound stages or wherever, warehouses, and build sets. And so, the crew's not standing out there all night while we're doing little kills and shit inside the cabins and stuff. And I also changed up the thing where something's going to happen at Crystal Lake, but across the lake is Camp Christian Lake. Ooh. And it is a spiritual retreat for these 9 badass high school Catholic girls who this Irish nun is going to find redemption some way, somehow, whether she's got to beat the bejesus out of them to do it. So she becomes this sort of, villain in the beginning until Jason shows up. These girls are from another state that came in to this place. They'd have no idea who this is, this Jason that's coming in trying to kill them. So unlike my Jason Lives, where they were very savvy, they don't know what's going on, but they have to fight this guy, and each one of them has some sort of badass thing that it becomes an interesting foe for Jason. But
I love this idea. First off, if you had done Camp Christian Lake, you maybe could have gotten John Shepard back to play Tommy Jarvis. Well, actually, did your script involve a Tommy Jarvis at all, or no?
No, not. My whole thing going in is like, this is, obviously it's Jason. Obviously it's Jason in his own turf. Obviously, instead of kind of I'm sort of doing the Halloween thing. I'm saying, okay, anything that happened after mine maybe existed, and maybe this is just a legend. I opened the script with these files were found by the Archdiocese of the Catholic Church, and some of this I had to make up because it all didn't make sense, but most of this is based on fact. So I tried to sort of dance around that, but I just wanted to give the audience a fun thrill ride again, but in a whole different way of seeing Crystal Lake, in the snow, come up with stuff that would look cool, in the snow. And also there's a throwback to something that happens in Jason Lives that is going to be played out that a lot of people always ask me about. And I said, wait for the sequel. And here we are 37 years later. I still haven't done the sequel because of the rights thing. Nobody would read the script, guys. You know, when I tried to get it out there, it's like, nope, these guys, they're never going to come to terms. Forget it. You know, Victor Miller has the, you know, boy Jason, and Pamela, you know, Sean Cunningham has Jason and the Mask. And so, you know, it ain't going to happen. So I saw this, I see all the fan films, and I saw one called Jason Has Risen. No, Jason Rises. I'm sorry, Jason Has Risen is what the original title of mine was. And Vicente was the producer on that thing. And, you know, this wonderful guy who was the director, James Sweet, I called him, as I call all of them, and tell them what I thought was so great about it. And I said, what do you want to do next? He said, I'd love to do something where Jason is born. And I went, oh, okay, yeah. And so like his life with Pamela and things after that. Yeah. So that night, something in my head exploded with this, wait a minute, a female serial killer in the 40s in America going through towns trying to find where they fit in. She's a 16-year-old with a baby who's deformed and retarded. We have communism. You guys have no idea what that was like in the 50s, as I do. And the Russians were going to drop a bomb on us. So we're building bomb shelters. There was such a sense of paranoia after the Second World War that I thought some strange woman who, you know, is writing in her diary. So we hear Pamela going from sociopath to full-on psychopath, you know, about what people are doing about her son and acting or to me, you know, and stuff. So it literally is, you know, those 10 years from 46 to 56. And that's kind of where they're going, you know, they're going to end up at that camp. And for her, this is nirvana. This is the world I know he'll be accepted in, and I'll be happy. You know,
well, have you heard about, I mean, I'm sure you've heard about the Crystal Lake prequel series that they announced, and it sounds like the most recent info is they're kind of retooling it. Maybe you could get involved.
Boys, that's what I'm doing. You know, I literally wrote Victor Miller yesterday again. You know, when I reached him about what I was doing, he said, Tom, I can't listen to it. I can't hear what you're saying. And my lawyer said we can't discuss it in any way. So I had no idea this other thing was happening until that Halloween of, I guess it was 22. Suddenly it comes out, and it's like, holy fuck. James and I went into a depression. And it's like, I mean, we worked so hard for 2 years on this thing. And, you know, I had just wished Victor had said, you know, cease and desist now, you know, so we did spend another year. But we have these incredible sequences and incredible stuff that was a series. So, you know, I actually got a hold of Brian Fuller, and he was supposed to be there last night. You know, he was on the guest list. And, you know, then I wrote him and said, well, with what's just happened, maybe you don't want to come because you're going to have a lot of Friday people asking a lot of questions. So I guess they started, they've written scripts, they were heading that direction. Something happened. And so now we don't know what's going on. And then they, you know, announce, you know, the Jason universe, and Christ knows what that's going to be. I don't know if that's like, you know, Jason's going to be a woman, Jason's going to be transsexual, Jason's going to be somehow woke in some way, plus hats, shirts, you know, it's going to be like Disneyland. I don't know. It's like this whole notion of, well, we have the rights, so we're going to do a whole universe of it. And when I think that, I think, you know, the universal universe of monsters that they're, you know, trying to do. But where this is all going to go for the fans and everybody, I don't know. But I have these two projects, you know, prequel and sequel to mine, you know, that are sitting there. I'm dying to do them. You know, I've got so many fans going, why are you not doing it? I go, I don't have the rights.
Yeah, it's been tied up for so long.
And you know what I was going to say, though,
from 9 years.
From our perspective, from people, you know, do a podcast on horror, huge fans of the Friday the 13th series. I know fans would love to see a new project that you are directing or writing, just because, you know, Jason Lives is such a fan favorite. And I know whether it's the prequel version or a sequel version, so many Friday the 13th fans would love to see something coming from Tom McLoughlin.
Yeah,
seriously.
your enthusiasm is contagious.
Yeah. And it's just, and people love, like, I mean, the fact that, like I said, like we read the entire Crystal Lake Memories book, and there's so many stories about different drama and fights and things during different movies. And then you get to the chapter on Jason Lives, and it was like a party the whole time. Everyone had so much fun. Everybody enjoyed it. And that says something. That's testament to you, and just the people involved. So I would love to see, I hope that you do get to do a project in the future. We have one final question for you, Tom, and we ask this to everyone we interview. And you've told us little things already, I think, that would count for this, but what is one thing that you can tell us about, let's say, your experience working on Jason Lives, that you've never told any other interviewer, podcaster, publication, convention, Q&A? Just one thing. It doesn't have to be the most gossipy, or it can be anything that
it doesn't have to be scandalous.
Yeah, just one thing that you've never told any other interview about your experience working on Part 6.
I don't think I've ever talked about this, because you just said how much fun it was. Part of the reason it was so much fun is that we were doing all nights, and then we'd have to go to bed as the rest of the, Covington workers are heading to work. So when you get to, Saturday, you're going to, sleep and on Sunday morning. And so, you sleep, and now it's Sunday night. What are you going to do? So we all found out that there was this incredible gay discotheque in Atlanta. So we all as a group would go, and we had a ball with these guys. I mean, dancing, and it was so much fun. And we did that all fucking night. So we just burned ourselves out. We made friends and all that, it's like, here comes the Friday people, so that was something that really kind of made the whole experience even better than the movie, in terms of just a chance to, burn off steam and get just everything out of your head and just dance and have fun. So that, and I think that had a lot to do, with why we got so bonded.
That's awesome. And especially in 1986.
Yeah, that's so cool that you guys all went. Did Tom Matthews go?
Yeah, I think everybody. I think it's
Jennifer Cook.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, Darcy was there all the time. There was a lot of the crew, too, that would go. It's sort of a blur in my mind, because it's like, those are the days when you smoked the discotheque and all the lights and stuff, and it was all one big,
it still is like that in some gay clubs, we can tell you.
I totally forgot that in the 80s, you could smoke anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. That sounds fun, and also what a way to let off some steam after constant nights of shooting,
Mm-hmm. Those guys, it's like no judgment, because I have a huge, affinity with the Black culture. And I did a tour where I was just going to Black clubs, hanging with Black families, going to Black churches. And there's no judgment, there. And if I'm the only white guy there, and there was the same thing. They knew basically we were all straight, but it did not matter. We were family of this, and it was so great to feel, loved and welcomed, and, it was an incredible, period where, that thing of music and that kind of music particularly really bonded everybody, in a great way.
That is so cool. Well, look, we've had so much fun chatting with you, especially coming off such a late night last night at this film festival. We know our listeners are going to really enjoy this. And Tom, we're so appreciative. Yeah. Well, thank you again, Tommy. We'll be in touch as to when the episode's coming out. Thank you. We wish you nothing but the best. We really hope that you'll continue with the Friday series, and we can see some of these projects materialize at some point. Fingers crossed. Yeah, wishing you all the luck in the world.
I'll be at the 40th screening as well.
Okay, yeah, that's coming up. I can't believe it. But yeah, and thank you guys. I love your show. I've listened to a number of them, and it's just, you have so much fun with it. And, you're great people. And you get that sense that you guys really, really love the genre and care about each other. And, there's no egos here. Some podcasts, it's difficult because they do all the talking, and you go, yeah. And you're, really generous. I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's very sweet of you. Thank you. We really appreciate that.
All right. Well, I'm sure I'll see you in the movies.
We will see you at screenings. Definitely. Okay. Take care. Have a great afternoon.
You. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to another episode of Happy Horror Time.
If you'd like to support the podcast, please sign up to be a patron at www.patreon.com/happyhorrortime. As a patron, you get access to all our bonus content, which now includes 2 new bonus episodes every month, a monthly after-show mini episode, access to our Discord community so you can chat with us directly, and the chance to review a film with us in one of our bonus episodes.
Patrons also get all our regular episodes ad-free and a day early, our monthly newsletter, the chance to vote in polls, and autographed Happy Horror Time stickers.
I'm Matt Emmert.
And I'm Tim Murdoch.
And we hope you have a happy horror time.